Having said this, when we are talking about the grades, the funds, and everything, and US institutions being so flexible, and with this new administration coming into picture in the US, how does this affect the students? Because there are a lot of skeptical narrations with the students are getting that you might be denied entry, or you might not get an admission, or it's not so safe to go now. So how does this shift the change from both the organization's side, the student side, as well as the whole industry altogether?
Well, I think I'll try to speak to general nationwide trends and then also to what we've actually seen with regard to the new administration. And then I imagine you'll have a really valuable perspective from CBU. So I would say that the interest among U.S. institutions in hosting international students is very strong and is not likely to diminish anytime soon. There are a lot of enrollment struggles domestically right now in the United States. There are simply demographic changes that mean there are fewer 18-year-olds now than there were a few years ago. So a lot of institutions are kind of struggling to meet their domestic enrollment targets. You also have an ongoing debate about the value of higher education in the United States, which is kind of deterring more domestic students. And the costs are ever increasing, right? So a lot of institutions are facing real challenges domestically and are very motivated to enroll more international students for those reasons, in addition to all of the wonderful aspects that international students bring to the campus. So from the institutional side, I think the interest is there and it will remain there. On the administration side, I think it's very important for everyone to keep in mind that as of today, as of filming, there have been no concrete changes to F1 student visa processes whatsoever. All of the previous regulations that were in place are still in place. We do not have any change. And I also had the opportunity to visit the U.S. Consul General here in Hyderabad on Monday of this week, spoke with the staff, who reassured me that they're fully staffed and capable to handle the demand for visa interviews. They're already handling 2,000 appointments per day as of right now, and that includes all visa types, and, B visitor visas and all kinds. But even on top of that, they are planning extended hours even more than previous years during student season when the peak demand is there. So they're very cognizant of the demand. They are equipped to meet it. They also wanted me to remind everyone that you can do your visa interview up to 365 days before the programs start. So as soon as you have your I-20, you should go ahead and make your appointment. There's absolutely no reason to wait for that. So they reassured me that there's been no direction from the federal government to reduce the number of visas issued, that there's no quota system where only a certain number of Indian students are given visas or anything like that. That every single visa interviewee is independently evaluated on the strength of their interview, and that they make those decisions independently of each other. So as far as we know, as of today, everything is as it was and ready for students to receive their visas.
That sounds reassuring.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Dan, from the university's point of view, because of all these miscommunications going around into the social media, are the US institutions facing any backlash or any challenges in terms of recruiting students?
Yeah, so there, in 2024, there was quite a drop in the number of students that entered U.S. universities coming from India and South Asia, and visa approvals played a big role in that. When we looked at the students that were, let's say they had been accepted for fall 24 or spring 25, and they chose to defer. A lot of that had to do with concern about the upcoming election, with friends who had gone for a visa appointment and been denied, and they said, okay, let me just step back and see what's going to happen. So, I think this spring will really tell us a lot. What our visa approval is going to look like. So if it trends upwards, then I think it will give confidence to so many students to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to go for it, do all the work. And so, so at least for me and a lot of the institutions that I communicate with a lot, there is a bit of a let's see what's going to happen, and everybody's asking all the time what's going to happen, and it's like, okay, here's my crystal ball. It's pretty. I can't see anything.
Easy, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. But then, I know that with the new embassy here, for example, that they were able to get through a lot of the backlog. So I think there have been improvements that way.
Yeah, the consulate reminded me that in 2024, every single first-time visa applicant got a slot.
That's
in Hyderabad.
Something very important.
Yeah,
Right.
And they're even better prepared. They're better staffed now than they were last year.
Yeah. And I think the technology that they implemented is really showing those red flags very quickly. So, a student who's maybe their finances aren't what they say they were, I think that they're basically, the student sits down, the visa officer sees this red flag, asks a question, I'm sorry, I won't be able to grant that today. So on the student's part, being honest, making sure that everything is in order, that everything you say is true, is so important. And then there are the other things, the coaching that you do around, confidence, knowledge of the institution, knowledge of the program.
Yeah.
It's so important. But
the visa officers gave us advice to give to students, right? And it's not groundbreaking, it's things we've heard before, but it was really interesting to hear directly from their perspective. They adjudicate visas based on some very simple factors. One, that the student is a legitimate student, which they evaluate based on their admission, but also are they able to express why this particular institution, why this program in ways that make sense. Two, do they have the financial means, capacity to support themselves through the program? And I think that the visa officers probably know more than U.S. institutions do about things like which banks are reliable, or how to spot fraudulent financial documents, that kind of thing. And then the third part is, do they intend to return to India after studying in the U.S.? Because keep in mind, F1 visa is a non-immigrant visa, and it is not okay in the visa interview to express that you intend to immigrate to the United States, right? So they evaluate these things, and then the piece of advice they really wanted students to have is avoid the prepared speech.
Yeah.
Avoid the prepared speech, avoid anything that sounds like it's too rehearsed. This is very challenging advice to give to students, right? Because you want to prepare, you want to be successful in this high stakes interview scenario. But I think the visa officers are looking to see that you have so internalized your reasons for the institution and the program that you can just naturally express why it's the right fit for you without having to recite a whole rehearsed script, right? And so it's a gut feeling kind of thing, I think, in a lot of cases. But you know what, I did appreciate the visa officers also showed a lot of empathy for students in understanding that it is a very stressful situation. And that they get that sometimes students are nervous. They get why students do rely on the rehearsed speeches. They also showed a lot of empathy for students who are denied once and then reapply and come back for a second interview, and expressed to me that that is a fresh start. It's a fresh chance, and students do get the visa sometimes on the second interview. So it's hard, I think, to act on this advice, but this is direct from the consular officers of what they're looking for.
But these 3 golden rules of getting your visa approved or let's call it 3 golden secrets of getting your visa approved will be really helpful. So thank you so much for that information. Okay. Now let's bring a change into this discussion. I have got one segment which we call it as a rapid fire round, and I'm going to ask some questions to each of you and see what answers do we get in this rapid fire round. Okay, so let's start. Let me see whose name is first here. Okay, we have Dan's name first. So Dan, let's start with you. What's the first word that comes to your mind when you hear international students?
Wonderful.
One event at CBU that international students should never miss.
Career fair.
Describe CBU's campus vibe in just 3 words.
Comfortable, beautiful, friendly.
Nice. What's that one thing about CBU that surprises students when they first arrive?
Surprises them. It's supposed to be rapid.
Yeah, rapid.
I'm not being very rapid.
First word that comes to mind.
How accessible professors are.
Nice. One Hindi word you have learned during your visits to India?
It's so bad. Oh goodness. I'm really, my background is applied linguistics, and I'm a horrible language learner. I just last night learned the word halib. Yeah, so okay. I ate it, which I guess is not Hindi. It's not Hindi, is it?
I'm sure the first word you must have learned was namaste.
For sure, yeah. Namaste. Yeah. Let me go ahead and do that again. Namaste.
Awesome. Right. So we are done with your 5 questions, and now it's Clay's turn. Clay, one word to describe AIRC.
Standards.
What's that one destination you traveled to work for? What's that one destination you traveled for work but ended up loving as a tourist?
Mongolia.
Mongolia, nice. If AIRC could predict one big change in international education by 2030, what would that be?
Diversity.
What's a random fun fact about AIRC that most people don't know?
A fun fact, at our conference we have a trivia night on the Friday night that is a lot of fun.
Yeah, so I was thinking the best conference.
Yeah.
Nice. Yep, the best conference among others. Yes, absolutely. Your favorite Indian food so far?
Oh, it's impossible to choose. Oh my gosh. But I actually love anything with the spinach, with palak.
That's another Hindi word.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
That is just, put anything in it and I love it.
After this, we are going to have lunch and you will get something with spinach there. Yes. All right. So let's move to our next segment, which we have named it as ethics, red flags, and choosing the right advisor. So I'm sure a lot of inputs from your end will be helpful here. So Clay, you work with many institutions globally. What are those key red flags which you want to showcase it to the students, and which the students should watch out before they select their advisor?
Yeah, so we mentioned a few earlier. I think it's important that students understand that agents should never guarantee admission into an institution or a program, that institutions retain the ability to make admission decisions. Agencies should never promise any kind of financial aid or package on behalf of institutions. You should be very careful if an agency asks for you to pay your tuition to them. Verify with the institution whether that's the case. It is a red flag if the agency keeps insisting on pointing you toward a specific institution when they really should be facilitating the student finding the best fit institution for them. These are some of the red flags. I think it's also important that the agency have a very clear schedule of their fees for their services, and before you agree to anything with the agency, that you have a clear list of what their costs and fees are. There should be a written contract between the student or their parent and the agency that outlines roles and responsibilities, that outlines costs. And you should always ask about or make sure you're aware of a complaints process. If you have any issue with the agency, they need to have a way to receive and respond to that complaint. Doesn't mean that you are necessarily right in complaining, but there needs to be a process in place to handle that.
Correct. Absolutely right. So some of the red flags which you might have incurred when the students have arrived on the CBU campus, and then you found out that okay, these students have not been guided properly. So
Yeah, so just no real understanding of what the academic program was. So they were attracted to some, data science. That sounds amazing. Or everybody's talking about data science, and then entering, but not. So fortunately, in our admissions process, when we launched our data science program, we realized that we weren't looking at the right things in the admissions.
Sure.
And so we ended up with some students who really weren't prepared for it. And so we had to adjust our admissions process. And then I was able to travel, meet my partners, and say, okay, this is the profile of the student that we're looking for. Right. And so kind of that back and forth of when the students come into my office and ask a question, and it makes me, that's the red flag, is like, oh, you don't really understand what the purpose of this program might be. I would say also accommodation can be like a real challenge in the U.S. And so like especially at the graduate level, most institutions don't have housing for all of their students. And so we've occasionally had students arrive in Memphis, call us from the airport, and say, I'm here, where am I going to live?
Yeah.
And so,
not setting yourself up for success.
Right, so the agency, right, a good agency, that would be part of advising, right? So not only that you got into the institution, but let's see if we can find, with the help of the university, where you can live. Fortunately, in that case, we have student organizations that we can plug the student into. So Indian Student Association, put them in the WhatsApp group, and so typically within 2 hours, they actually have a place to live. But if the agency knew that about CBU, got the student connected with the student group before traveling,
it would have been much easier for the student.
Right.
Or another point can be weather.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I live in Colorado, which is a beautiful place, but we have 4 very distinct seasons, and winter can be very cold and snowy. And so I have seen Indian students arrive wearing flip-flops and not having proper shoes, and it's -10 Celsius or colder outside, right? So a good agent should be preparing. No, really, it's colder than you think.
Absolutely. I agree to that, because when we started 15 years ago advising to the students, we didn't have many things in place, but over the period of time, we realized that there has to be some more additions we have to do in our checklists to guide the students further. So one of the very first questions in the set of questions which we ask to the students is about their health conditions. The students having problems with their sinusitis, we check this check mark into the checklist, so that we are not guiding them to a place where it is colder, even during the winter and all. Such students are guided to the places where the cold is bearable, because if we guide the students to a place which gets colder during the winters, it becomes very difficult for them to even survive a couple of weeks as well. So that is one of the things which we take it into consideration when we guide the students, and check with them if they have any health conditions. And other point, when you said accommodation, one point which I think a lot of them miss out is on the student insurances, the health insurances. Most of the institutions have made it mandatory to get the health insurance from their side, but not every institution?
Not every institution. It is mandatory that international students have health insurance. That is a federal regulation. Most institutions require students to buy their prepared insurance that they have, but some will allow you to have your own as long as it meets certain requirements. Even a basic one is which airport to arrive at.
Right.
I used to work at a community college in Washington State, and at least twice a year we would get a phone call from a student at the Washington, D.C. airport asking, why don't I see the table? You said there would be a table waiting to pick me up. And we said, sorry, you have to buy another ticket and another 6-hour flight to get where you're going.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ouch.
That's really, really, I would say it becomes a nightmare for the students if they find that, okay, I am not at the right place.
Exactly.
And a kid who is coming to an undergrad program and having to face this difficulty will become very, very difficult. You mentioned at a community college, I'm sure the student must be just 18, 19 years.
Exactly.
And
it raises the question, did they think the institution was in Washington, D.C.?
Right. Did they understand that Washington State and Washington, D.C. are two different places?
Right.
Exactly. And then it goes back to the guiding source again, that the student advisors which were guiding them have not briefed them about the city, the state, or the location that much.
So we have a challenge that, we are CBU, but there's also California Baptist University.
Yeah.
And so we'll have students that have applied there, but are contacting us for an update.
Yes.
And vice versa.
Names that are similar. I mean, University of Colorado Denver, University of Denver. It happened all the time. Yeah.
I can understand how the difficulties, what type of difficulties the students might face, in such situations. So, again, it is boiling down to who is guiding you, who is advising you. Are you taking anybody's help in getting yourself guided, or you're doing it on your own? Because I found that the people who are also doing things on their own have not done the research so much, because there's so much on the internet. There's so much of information, irrelevant, relevant, and unnecessary information on the internet, that it becomes very difficult for a student to just filter it down what is important and what is not to them. And that is why we are doing a lot of things to make sure that the relevant information which is correct and right is reaching out to them, the demo of which I'm going to show you after this. Right? But having said this, are there any checklists which the AIRC keeps in mind, or what type of a checklist which AIRC considers to select the agencies, the advisors which can be certified, and what are those major important points which you see with which you reject the advisors which cannot be certified?
Sure. So the AIRC certification process is based on our standards of ethical best practice. And we're both very familiar with the standards. I was an agency reviewer. I was on the certification commission. Now I oversee the organization. Dan is an agency reviewer for us. There are 5 standards which have over 40 different subpoints to them. The first standard is about the overall success and sustainability of the company. You have to have been in business for at least 2 years. You have to have a proper business license. We need to see evidence that you are making business decisions in a thoughtful and strategic manner. We need to know the full scope of your operation. Do you offer test prep, for example, or travel services or anything like that? So standard number 1. Standard number 2 is about integrity of the advising and admission process. So are the staff well trained and knowledgeable about the U.S. higher education system? Do you make sure that your counseling staff are unaware of any commission that you may be receiving from the institution? How do you train staff? What are your policies around ensuring that you're not making promises that you can't keep? All those kinds of things, right? Standard 3 is the relationship between the agency and the student or parent client. So making sure that there is a clear schedule of fees, that there is a contract governing that relationship, that the agency keeps records of all of their student interactions for at least 3 years, that there are student satisfaction surveys as well, some of the elements that we look at. Standard 4 is the relationship between the agency and any institutions that they may partner with. So again, there needs to be a clear binding contract outlining the roles and responsibilities, outlining any financial terms that may exist, protecting the institution's intellectual property, ensuring that agencies only display logos of institutions where they have a contract and an actual relationship with that institution. Pro tip, if you see an agency advertising the Harvard logo, it's unlikely that they actually have a relationship with Harvard, right? Exactly. And then also need to maintain satisfaction survey results from the institutions as well. And then the 5th standard is very simple. It's the complaints process, simply ensuring that the agency does have a complaints process in place so that anyone who's dissatisfied with their services has a way to express that. And in most cases, certification is a multi-step process. In most cases, if a company is unable to meet any of these standards, it comes out very early in the process. But I think the entire process is quite valuable to do a very detailed check into every element of the company's business practices.
Right. So you were mentioning, Dan, you are also an agency reviewer. So you review a lot of companies which are either practicing these standards or not, these ethics or not. Yeah. So what type of flaws did you find when you were rejecting these companies in your review?
So actually, because the initial process is so standardized and rigorous, typically if it comes to me to do a review, the chances of them being rejected are pretty low.
Yeah.
And so really my job is to go into the agency, meet with the leadership, any managers, counselors, marketing staff, and just make sure that whatever they submitted, I can find proof of, right? And so the 2 that I, recently did, I'm happy to say they were, so well organized. It was really easy to confirm that what they said they were doing, they were actually doing, right? And then so I put together a report that's objective, and send it back to AIRC, and then there's a committee that will review it and then make the final decision.
Yep.
Correct. So I think this brings to the end of our discussion, and before we wrap it up, I really want to understand or want you both to give those pro tips to the students. I'm sure the whole discussion has been filled up with so many tips, but considering today's situation, considering what is going on around in the social media, considering what universities are expecting, and after knowing each and every step of the process which goes on behind the scenes in an admission, what are those few lines of wisdom which you want to give it to our audience?
Sure. I'll start. One, there are so many takeaways that could be really important, but I think I really want to emphasize that if you are looking for an agency to help you on your journey, that you find an AIRC certified agency specifically. There are about 55 or 60 certified agencies here in India, so it's a very elite group. It's a very small number of companies that have reached this certification. Obviously, One Window is one of our certified agencies. This certification seal from AIRC gives you confidence that you are choosing a company that meets the highest standards of ethical best practice. And so I strongly recommend that you look for that seal to be confident in working with a company. I also want to mention just briefly that the certification is not a one and done, that there are actually annual reporting requirements that the agencies must provide to AIRC, that the initial certification is valid for 5 years, at which point they must be completely recertified, go through the entire process again. And there is a public accountability mechanism as well. So any certified agency is subject to public comment. And if anyone discovers that one of our agencies is acting in any unethical manner or in any way that breaches one of the standards, we are obligated to investigate it. There have been outcomes that have resulted in agencies no longer being certified in cases of fraud or abuse or misrepresentation or anything like that. So it is one of the most stringent marks of quality in any industry, certainly in this industry, and it gives you a lot of confidence as the consumer.
Right. Thank you so much for that. Dan, your lines of wisdom to the students.
So yes, I'd like to echo that. Look for an ARC certified agency, and then once you enter the building, don't follow the crowd. Right. So you are an individual. You have your dreams, so take some time. And so I'm sure people are giving you recommendations, of friends and family that have had success, but that doesn't mean you have to do exactly the same thing.
Yep.
And so working with an agency like One Window, where the counselors are really going to ask you several questions about your dreams, your desires, your talents, make sure it's a conversation and that you find the career path and the institution that's going to help you get there.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you so much for that. And for the information of everybody, like Clay mentioned, we are a certified agency with the AIRC. We are also partnered with CBU. Together we are working with in helping a lot of students further in their higher education. And it's not just about the partnership. It's all about what is the vision, what is the expectation we are moving forward with. It's not only about helping the students get their higher education abroad, it's also about how correctly we can help the students. So thank you so much, both of you, for this powerful conversation and all the insights which you have given about being an ethical advisor as well as what goes on behind the scenes of an admissions team. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching this. I'm sure if you have liked it, please, if you have liked what we have discussed, please don't forget to subscribe, like and share it with your friends whom you think it might be helpful. Plus, we will be back soon with more eye-opening conversations like this. So till then, thank you and all the best.